Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and wonderful guests, good morning.
Good morning.
One more factor to consider in the gun control debate. I love a good debate, a healthy discussion involving opposing viewpoints. But gun control is a sensitive and emotionally charged subject. I will be treating it as fact-based, but I find it hard to ignore the human element in the facts that I'm about to present. Whatever side of the debate that you are on, I hope to at least provide you with some additional facts to either strengthen your beliefs or to at least consider changing them. I would be most successful if I could get at least one of you to take action. I hope you'll join me at the end in a brief discussion during the brief Q&A session. Why is gun control a debate, first of all? I believe that it begins with the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and that became the law of the land 222 years ago. The amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." I know the language is a bit outdated and vague, but in other words, the people's right to own guns will not be violated by the federal government. This means everyone can own a gun under federal law. It also means that right can never be taken away as long as the federal government exists, and that's a fact. The federal government won't stop you from owning a gun. They will also not get involved in how you go about getting that gun or how you use it. Like many other aspects of life in the U.S., such as voting and driving a motor vehicle, gun ownership is regulated by the states. In New York, for example, you need to apply for a permit to own a handgun. The requirements are pretty easy. You must be at least 21 years old. You must be of good moral character. You must not have been convicted of a serious offense. You must not have had a previous license revoked, and you must have stated whether you have ever suffered any mental illness or been confined to a mental health institution. That is the extent of the background check required to own a gun in New York. Most of the other states are even more lenient. New York and Connecticut, as a matter of fact, have some of the strictest gun control laws in the country. Has this system of regulation worked up till now? Have guns remained in the hands of the most responsible individuals? I need only mention names of places, and immediately the specific details come to mind. Columbine, Virginia Tech, Aurora, Sandy Hook. I don't believe it's necessary to report the specific facts of these incidents. They were all mass shootings where 4 or more people were killed by a single shooter. 25 of these incidents occurred in the past 7 years, with 7 mass shootings occurring in 2012 alone. But in the last 4 years, some states have passed laws making it even easier to purchase and own guns. In Missouri, for example, it is legal to carry a gun while you're drunk. And if you fire it in self-defense, it's perfectly legal as well. In Kansas, permit holders can carry concealed weapons inside elementary schools. In Nebraska, you can get a permit to carry a gun even if you've pled guilty to a violent crime. Clearly, there are states that are polar opposites when it comes to their gun control laws. Earlier this year, new laws were passed in New York and Connecticut banning semi-automatic weapons, limiting ammunition magazine size to 10 rounds, expanding background checks, and allowing police to seize a person's weapons without a warrant if they have probable cause that that person may be mentally unstable. There's a movement to get these same laws passed by the federal government, and one specific group that has been very active in this movement is called the Newtown Action Alliance. And I first heard about them while watching a 60-minute show where the parents of the children killed in Sandy Hook Massacre were interviewed. Did anybody else watch this amazing TV program? It was heart-wrenching listening to the stories of parents finding out that their children had been the ones killed while other children were spared. But it was truly inspiring to know that they are taking action to get these stricter gun control laws passed so that these incidents never happen again. And one grieving father put it most eloquently, and I quote, "We have an obligation to our children. It is going to happen again. And every time, it's somebody else's school. It's somebody else's town. It's somebody else's community. Until one day you wake up and it's not." Their first attempt at getting the new gun control laws passed in Congress failed this past April. A majority of 60 votes were needed, but only 54 senators voted yes. 46 senators voted no. One more factor to consider in the gun control debate. Can you guess what that factor is? It's you. It's you. And it's me. It's all of us. Make your voice heard and weigh in on this debate. Don't wait until election day. Find out what your senator or representative is voting on gun control laws and let him or her know that it matters to you when election time comes. Don't wait for the next time someone decides to take out their anger on innocent strangers again in a barrage of bullets. Because it might not be somebody else that time. That concludes the speech portion. Timer, Elsa, please reset the time for the question and answer. Questioning, I'll be glad to engage in a discussion if anybody has any questions. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it because it's a heavy subject.
What do you think of the amendment? Do you think that principle is true even though it was said years ago, or do you think we should follow it completely? What are the debates about it?
That is an excellent question, and the 46 senators that voted against the measure, that was their only argument, that you cannot infringe on the Second Amendment only because it is part of the Bill of Rights, and all of those 10 Bill of Rights, they've never been changed. That is the law of the land. You bring up a good point. 222 years ago, that was written. The conditions were very different at that time. The U.S. was fighting for survival against Great Britain, and they were dependent on militias, the people, to take up arms and help the Continental Army. Remember George Washington from your history lesson. So it's definitely outdated, and I think it would take a tremendous movement inside the Supreme Court to have that type of amendment overturned, because it is time. It is time to re-examine this. It doesn't mean because we've been doing it so long that we should continue doing it. Any questions?
I personally agree with you, but to play devil's advocate, what do you say to somebody who feels like their rights are being taken away if you're infringing on their Second Amendment rights?
Thank you, Cassandra. That's a great question. I would say that all the rights that are guaranteed to us by the government are not only rights, they're privileges. It's a privilege to be a citizen of this country, to live in this country that I believe is the greatest country in the world. But we have to do our part to make these rights mean something. And it can't be as easy as going to a gun show and showing up with $500 and buying a rifle. You've got to make it harder than that. To get a license, you go to school, you take a test, you pass a written test, and then you take an exam. Definitely, let's do something like that in all of the states and make that mandatory. The states have a lot of power, and that is I believe one of the drawbacks of the federal system is giving the states so much power. But what happens is you develop different cultures. All the senators that voted yes on that amendment were from the Northeast. The ones who voted no, guess where they're from? Midwest and the rest of the southern states. Have time for one more question? No.
I've heard statements before when they say, I've heard statements when they say it's not people that kill, it's not guns that kill people, it's bad people that possess guns to kill people.
Without a doubt. All these shootings, I'm sorry.
No, what do you feel about that statement?
Without a doubt. I was debating on whether to make that the subject of my speech. The guns don't just get up and start shooting people. It's people that carry guns. And these expanded background checks, that is the key. We got to work harder to make sure the right people, only the right people, the most responsible people, the most sane and healthy people have these guns. Don't give it to everybody else. Because, again, it's a right and a privilege to own guns, and it is our right in these United States. Mr. Toastmaster.